My brother-in-law is upset, and he told everyone that his brother stole me from him. I've only got a few more stories left about mother-in-law. The star of psychological thrillers such as Irish Stew Incident, Blue Wedding Dress Debacle, and S'mores Dip Incident. That is, people seem to really like them. I thought I'd go all the way back to the beginning, when mother-in-law first displayed her true self. I've said previously that without her, I'd never had met my husband, which is true. What I didn't explain is exactly how horrible she got that first night. But looking back, it's red flags galore. My husband and I went to the same university, but on totally different courses. I was a humanities student. He was a STEM student, on opposite sides of campus. And it was a large university, and neither of us ever went out to parties or anything like that. We even had different favorite coffee shops. There were only 2 on campus, and he preferred one, I preferred the other. I would probably never have met my husband if it weren't for her. I had a job as an admin assistant, part-time, mainly just scanning and filing, and immensely boring. To pass the time, I would chat with the other people in the office, and we'd do things like potlucks and parties at the end of the month. Mother-in-law worked there as a senior assistant full-time, and she was 1 or 2 steps below office manager. She'd always seemed nice to me, until she wasn't. At one of these parties she cornered me. She asked me if I was single, and I told her I wasn't seeing anyone. She immediately said I should meet her son, and invited me over for dinner to meet him. Aside from this being grossly inappropriate, I had just got out of a relationship. So I said I'd check my schedule, intending to dodge the invite for as long as possible, as I only had 1 more month there before my contract was up. Then she showed me a picture. In the picture was son 1 with his wife, son 2 with his wife, mother-in-law, father-in-law. Son 3 stood alone, and daughter with her husband. I assumed she meant to introduce me to son 3, since he was the only unmarried person in the picture, and not to be shallow. But wow, suddenly I wanted to go to dinner and meet him, and I was right to want that, as son 3 would one day become my husband. So a few nights later I show up at her place, holding a nice bottle of drink, and wearing an even nicer dress. She smiled, welcomed me in, and introduced me to son 1, who was apparently recently divorced. He was arrogant, full of himself, condescending, kept staring at me, and kept putting his hands on my waist, all in full view of mother-in-law, who smiled like nothing was wrong. I go to sit on the sofa, right against the arm, because I figured son 1 couldn't get me there. But he comes and sits on the arm of the chair. I budge over, and he moves next to me and puts his arm over the back of the sofa where I am. We keep going like this, with me moving a couple inches over and him following me. Mother-in-law tells us that son 3, my future husband, might be coming by. And he does. Right as I'm about to fall off the sofa, on the opposite end I started on. Future husband. Stop harassing the poor woman. Hi, I'm my future husband's name. My brother isn't bothering you, is he? Mother-in-law. Before I can say anything, I am proud to say that I raised 3 perfect gentlemen. Future husband looks like he doesn't believe a word, and he goes to get father-in-law. We sit down to dinner. Mother-in-law and father-in-law sit on one side of the table. I am directed to sit opposite them with son 1 on my other side, and future husband at the head of the table, between me and mother-in-law. Mother-in-law keeps asking me questions, and I tell her about my life up until now. And as she is so specific with her nagging, I don't hold back on the whole well. Mom is an Irish immigrant, and my father's family are Jewish thing, as well as the first in my family to go to university thing, and the dad bailed on us pretty early. But mom worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my brother and I thing. Son 1 is clearly not paying attention to a single word, and keeps touching my thigh under the table, so I alternate between ignoring him, and having to smack his hand away. Father-in-law is very interested in my uncle, who is a carpenter and owns a small D business, and taught me a lot. My future husband is hanging on my every word, asking me questions, and trying to find out all he can. And I'm doing the same on my end, trying to include everyone but pretty much focused on him. The meal was chicken and potatoes, and I did a frankly expert job of cutting away the raw parts of the chicken, and hiding it in the potatoes. However, because I did this, I knew that when the time came to scrape plates, I had to jump to it. So did future husband, who had done the same thing I had. In the kitchen, away from the others, we got to talking. The conversation basically went, future husband, I can see and hear you smacking son 1's hand away. Want me to beat him up for you? It would also be for me because he just horrible in general. Me. No thanks. Is it just me or does mother-in-law suddenly hates me? Future husband. Probably the Irish thing. Or the Jewish thing. Me. Oh. Future husband. Sorry. Me. Why are you apologizing? Future husband. Because that's my mother and my brother. And this a very bad time to ask you out. But I want to do it anyway. I gave him my number then and there. Father-in-law appears, smirking. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. But mother-in-law has asked me to make coffee. Future husband, give me a hand. OP, she wants to see you. Future husband blushes bright red. And I go in to talk to mother-in-law. I don't know where son one went in this time. But he wasn't in the front room or kitchen. Mother-in-law. So what do you think of son one? Me carefully. You raised a lovely man. You should be proud. Mother-in-law. I am. I gave him your number. So here's his to put you on equal footing. She held out a scrap of paper and I took it. Feeling physically ill at the idea of me and son one going further, but also aware that she was my superior at work, and I was a guest in her home. I figured I could just take the number to appease her, and then not use it, as I was only contracted to work there for another month. Me. Thanks. Mother-in-law. I'm worried there was some misunderstanding on your part. You see, I brought you here for son one, not future husband. Son one just got divorced. He needs someone nice to get him out the other side. And I'm worried you and future husband would be inappropriate. What with your age gap. And at the time this story takes place, both me and son one were 21. While future husband was 22. I don't know how son one had already been married and divorced by this time, but my husband is pretty sure it was a shotgun wedding, followed by son one changing his mind about fatherhood. Future husband and father-in-law come back in. I sit at one end of a love seat and future husband comes to sit next to me. Father-in-law, mother-in-law, and son one sit on the 3-seater sofa. I see mother-in-law whisper something to son one and brace myself. Son one comes over to the love seat and physically forces his way in between me and my future husband, as the seat can only fit 2 people. Son one then shoves future husband until he has to stand up or fall on the floor. I don't throw the word brute around, but this guy was a brute. Future husband smiles apologetically and goes to the single-seater chair. The conversation is exactly the same as before, with mother-in-law blowing hot and cold to me at any given moment, father-in-law being genuinely interested in me, future husband wanting to talk to me, and son one having no concept of personal space. I excused myself really quickly after that, and future husband and son one both offered to drive me home, only for father-in-law to tell them both to stop being idiots, and he drove me himself. On the way, he joked about me and future husband pulling the old switcheroo, and apologized on behalf of mother-in-law. Future husband texted me later that night. Future husband. So can we not call that our first date? Because that was horrible. Edit. For people who are asking, later that night, son one sent me a dirty picture of himself, and called me a hateful name for not responding in kind. And 6 months later, when future husband reintroduced me to the family as his girlfriend, son one cornered me in the kitchen, and tried to feel me up, and future husband rescued me again and gave son one a black eye. To this day, son one gets drunk and tells the story of when future husband stole his girlfriend. Mother-in-law spent the rest of the time I worked there asking about me and son one. Update. So this is about 4 years ago, shortly before the blue wedding dress debacle. Mother-in-law was turning 50. Although my husband tells me she'd been turning 49 for a few years now, and she wanted her 4 kids, 3 sons including my husband and a daughter, to plan the whole thing. They were allowed help from no one except their respective partners. Here was the issue. My husband had recently begun a new job, at entry level. He was working 60 to 80 hours a week. Good brother-in-law and his wife were both working full-time jobs while going through the adoption process. Sister-in-law had 3 kids and was a nursery teacher. Only one of all these kids was over 10, her oldest, and the rest of her day was spent around little children. Her husband worked in the next town over in a job that required regular overtime. Horrible brother-in-law refused to step up to the plate, kept saying some other time, when people tried to plan with him. I don't talk bad about people for no reason, but like he's a total horrible person who to this day hits on me whenever he has the chance. And at this moment in time he was literally unemployed and living in mother-in-law and father-in-law's basement. He had nothing to do, aside from plays box, and let her cook for him, and he still refused to help plan the party. About 3 weeks before the party was meant to happen, my husband caught flu. I came home from work around 2:30. Back then I was a teaching assistant, to find my husband shaking and sweating over his laptop, planning the party entirely on his own. He then explained to me why his siblings weren't helping, and said that as the party was 3 weeks away, it had to be sorted now. When he was on sick leave, I messaged his siblings asking for some help with the party, and good brother-in-law and sister-in-law both said they'd love to, but they were busy, and horrible brother-in-law said, "If it's so important to you, then you do it." I made my husband talk me through everything, including the email mother-in-law had sent him, which listed exactly what she wanted, from flowers to decorations to seating plan, and specified which venue, too. I sent my husband to bed and started ringing around local vendors who could do exactly what mother-in-law had asked for. For the most part, I only got quotes, but for the venue, as she had specified what she wanted exactly, I booked it, both because she was set on having it, and I managed to get 40% off. She also wanted handmade decorations by her kids. This meant a collage of photos of them all, and various DIY handmade decorations. I went to the local craft store, got my husband, good sister-in-law and brother-in-law on FaceTime. Horrible brother-in-law was busy, and walked through the store buying anything they liked, which was pretty much just glitter, string, craft paper and some frames. I also put the gift bags she wanted, mini champagne and chocolate with a thank you note, in my cart online, but didn't purchase. For everything else, I made a spreadsheet of vendor name, contact info, what they were offering, price, and the discount they'd offered. With a few it was significantly cheaper, as I have a cousin who's a bartender. Another relative is a baker, a friend of a friend offered to do music, another is a caterer. I did my best to include all the siblings, and I managed to get the good-in-laws on FaceTime a few more times, and plus my husband did the invites, once he was feeling better, but for the most part, it was me planning. This seemed fair to me as, while she wasn't my mother, I was the only person out of me, my husband, and all the siblings and spouses, who worked totally regular hours and didn't have a child of my own to look after. And they all told me, except horrible brother-in-law, that they were grateful for the help. Eventually, 2 weeks before the party, it was pretty much sorted. All I had to do was call back the people I'd spoken to and confirm. But until I did that, the only thing guaranteed was the venue and the people who had RSVP'd yes to the invites. My husband took the pile of business cards, quotes and plans I had made with the vendors, and went to meet mother-in-law and his siblings for lunch, where she'd asked him for a status update. I don't know exactly what happened, but at some point my husband admitted that I'd done a lot of the planning, using her specifications as a guide. She lost her mind. He came home apologizing just as she rang me. I put it on loudspeaker, so my husband heard everything as mother-in-law ranted at me over the phone, saying this was meant to be something for her kids to do to bring them closer together. I apologized and explained why her kids hadn't come together the way she asked them to, that she said I should have held off for them to sort it out. I reminded her that they had less than 2 weeks left to cover everything, and I hadn't confirmed with anyone yet, and mentioned the discounts I'd wrangled, which had knocked a few hundred off the starting price. She then replied with something anti-Semitic, "I'm half Jewish," about how your lot would do anything to save money, and something anti-Irish about me being manipulative. Then she said, "I don't want you having any influence over this party. I put my kids in charge. Leave them to it." While all this was going on, my husband was texting good brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and even managed to voice record one of the anti-Semitic parts. He sent this to good brother-in-law and sister-in-law saying, "Mom wants us to do all the planning, so we're going to let OP off the hook, okay?" They both texted me apologizing for mother-in-law, saying they talked to her, and they would handle party planning. My husband turns to me with the biggest grin on his face. He said, "Right, in order to ensure you have absolutely nothing to do with this party, could you do one final favor and ring your vendors, and confirm we won't need your discounts?" So I did. Then he tells me that the photo frames I bought could do with something in them. And have we ever considered making a collage of all of our photos? So we made one of us that he put on the wall, and made one of me and my brother for my mom's birthday. He sees the craft paper, and wonders how long it's been since either of us made a paper aeroplan, and we decide to make some because it's been years. Then he asks to go on my laptop and look at the spreadsheet, and oops, his finger slipped and deleted it. Then his finger slipped again and removed the gift bags mother-in-law had wanted from my cart. We left what my husband had done as it was, but as when he'd done it he was very sick with flu. It wasn't a lot. The venue booking was done on his card, and canceling would mean losing the deposit, so we left that intact. We messaged the siblings saying the venue was booked, but nothing else was done. The siblings spent the next 12 days balancing planning the party with everything that had stopped them previously. While it was still my husband, Good sister-in-law and brother-in-law doing everything while horrible brother-in-law noped out of planning. Again, they told him that he could take part of the credit, knowing he would be as stupid about it. So on the drive there he didn't hesitate to take credit for the whole party, saying no one had helped him whatsoever, and he'd done everything himself. Reminder, last he heard, I had the perfect party all ready to go. They looked into caterers, but the caterer requested almost double what mine had, as it was less than 2 weeks' notice. So they decided to order pizza instead. They booked a florist, but the florist couldn't do the arrangements exactly how mother-in-law wanted. They paid for the drinks, but forgot the bartender, and father-in-law went behind the bar to serve drinks all night. They forgot the DJ, and my husband was able to hook his Spotify up to a speaker, but he was using the free version, so there'd be an ad or two every 30 minutes, and songs would play at random. The cake was a store-bought sheet cake with brightly colored icing, and clearly meant for a child's birthday, and there was enough cake for maybe half the attendees, even when it was cut as small as possible. End of the night, I got yelled at by mother-in-law. I reminded her that horrible brother-in-law had literally just taken credit for everything that happened, but she insisted that I had set him up to fail by leaving him to it. My husband, good brother-in-law and sister-in-law all said that mother-in-law was the one who requested they plan it. I couldn't be held responsible for their actions. And it kind of worked, in that she stopped yelling at me, but she never forgot it. Father-in-law realized what had happened and laughed and gave me a hug before driving mother-in-law home.